ride with me to the other clans and we will defeat the sky people.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.
Hello out there in podcast and YouTube land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that lift or separate them from the average genre fare. Are you new to us? Well, we are glad to see you. I don't know that I can technically see you. Well, we're glad that you're listening to us or watching us, because David and I have a unique and nearly branded form of criticism where we are obsessed with the minutia of some of these horror and science fiction classics and not so classics. If you are coming back, then you know exactly what I'm talking about, and I really don't. So there you go. I am here with my good friend and co-host, David Horton. David, how are you doing today?
I'm well. That was a nice open. I love the, you snuck in minutia there, which is always a good sneak. That's great.
Yeah, you didn't say Gesundheit.
No. Gesundheit. But yes, I like that. That was a good opening. It's been going well. I'm excited to get back to the podcast, and I was doing a bunch of stuff last week, but I did have time to squeeze in some genre stuff. And this time, ironically, for most of our repeat listeners, it is actually science fiction. That I was doing, because I've been doing a lot of horror lately.
Just trespassing all of my shit.
Trespassing into your world, But no, and I have mentioned this before. I know I've mentioned on the podcast. I don't know if I've mentioned it as what I was watching or what I've been doing genre week. But it's okay, because I'm only a third through anyway. And I just finished season 1 of Love, Death, and Robots, which is the Netflix series that we've talked about a couple of times, I think, on the show. It's really unique and different. And when it first came out, I was so totally against it. I was like going, doesn't sound any good, doesn't interest me. It's all animation, yada, yada. It's created by Tim Miller. Tim Miller he made his directorial debut with Deadpool. So quite a good way to start your film career.
That's funny. I know a Tim Miller, but I don't think it's the same person.
Probably not. But he created it. It has some other producers and showrunners with it, among them Joshua Donan and David Fincher. So some good kind of cred going into it. It is a series. They're in their 3rd season now. And like I said, I've just finished season 1. But it's all of these short animated things. It's very much like Heavy Metal, the movie was, or very much like, do you remember Aeon Flux or whatever Liquid Television, I think was what it was called.
It was MTV. The show was Liquid Television, but Aeon Flux was like a segment of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a lot like Liquid Television, where you would have a series of shorts not connected at all. It's almost like reading a short story book, but they're all science fiction. They all have some way to do with love, death, and robots. Usually all 3 in the topic, but that's not a criteria that all 3. But the animation styles are drastically different. The voice talents are incredibly good, and some of them you'll recognize and go, oh, wow, I didn't know they're doing this kind of thing. Some really great storytelling. So I highly recommend it if you like science fiction short stories. It's really good. And I'm only 1/3 of the way through.
And you said Netflix, right?
Yeah, Netflix. And like the first season has 18 episodes.
But they're real short.
Oh, right? Yeah. Some of them are 6 minutes. So it's not like.
Okay, so is it not a show of shorts? It's just individuals?
Think of it like a television series, and each episode has varying lengths and varying stuff.
Okay.
So
So they're
it's
not
an
putting a
entire
bunch together in one episode. It's
correct,
single. Okay.
correct.
Gotcha.
And that way you can also pick and choose how you want to watch them too. Like, oh, I only have 10 minutes. Oh, I'll just watch this one. Or,
Gotcha.
this one's 22 minutes long. I want something a little bit, heftier sort of thing. But great directors, great animation. It's and some really, really cool storytelling that just gives you like a hint of something. And it's kind of like the best short stories where you go, man, I wish they turned that into a novel. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of storytelling. Joe Lansdale did one. He reminded me of you. As soon as I saw it, I went, oh, that's definitely a Lansdale. That's definitely a Tim story. Actually, I think he's done more than one. But I definitely saw one that was by Joe Lansdale.
Interesting. So, now I'm really curious.
Yeah, they're really neat. They've do you remember this was a few episodes ago or whenever, and we were talking about Harlan. It may have been last year, but when after he passed away, and we were talking about our favorites of Harlan and what he's done, and I told you about the one short story that always impressed me was one where it actually starts and the guy is just waking up on the floor and he is on an alien planet. It could even be Mars. I don't remember, but he is in essentially a life capsule, a small like a shed shack sort of thing that's been there. And he can't move because across the little control room from him is a sentry robot that has determined he's a threat and has shot him once. And that's why he's laying on the ground, just waking up. And that's how the short story starts. And it's all this in his mind. How do I get away from this robot sort of thing? I found out that that's an episode in season 2. That short story by Harlan Ellison is in season 2. So it's got some cool cred and I highly recommend it. That's what I was doing this week is catching up on Love, Death and Robots. And everybody should do that. What about you?
Well, my genre topic of the week, of course, I'm back down the halls of Shudder as I usually am, but it is slam packed full of cred as well. I watched I think it's 10, maybe it's 8. I can't remember how many episodes it is. Episodes of 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time. I cannot recommend this more. Especially for folks out there that are younger and unaware of some of the older movies that are out there and how they have inspired and or gone on to reflect horror as it is today. This movie, well, it's a series. They do anywhere from 10 to 12 moments per episode. It has a slew of hosts, as you can see behind me. There's Mike Flanagan, Tanner Dew, the author, is in there, as are people like Joe Dante, Greg Nicotero, Mick Garris. I'm just kind of looking at a list of because there's a ton of them. Kate Siegel, Mike Flanagan's wife. A lot of Flanagan-esque people are in this, and what they do is it's not like they lead you in like they're ranking, this is the best up to number one, but that's not really what it's all about. It's about hitting that movie moment and then letting people talk about it and what it led to in relation to them or their work. And I was blown away by it because some of the stuff, like, they have the Phantom of the Opera in there, but they also have Black Sabbath, which is right above me in that picture there. They have, I think the one exception, that's not a movie, is probably Haunting of Hill House. I think that's one of the scariest movie moments in there. Okay. But listening to people like Mike Flanagan and Greg Nicotero talk about Christopher Lee playing Dracula and how scary he was, it's just absolutely, you will love this. It is. It was appointment television for me. It was coming on once a week on Wednesdays for 8 or 10 weeks, and I watched it every Wednesday as soon as it was out. So, and
now is it released all together, or do you still have to? Okay.
Yep, and it's on Shudder for all you folks out there. I highly, highly recommend it. It's like a college course in the best of horror movies. So
That sounds awesome.
Mhm.
I know that I saw several tweets from Stephen King over the past little while where he's talking about it and how incredible it is.
Yeah. Oh, and you remember how I talked about Eli Roth's history of horror and how
Yeah.
good it is?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I speculated whether or not it's all him or it's actually someone else and he's just the face of it. Well, the guy that does that does this. His name is
Okay.
Kurt Singh. So he is the mastermind behind this. I'm sorry, I just realized it is 8 episodes, not 10 episodes. And
Mhm.
he directed all 8 episodes and he wrote all 8 episodes, it looks like.
Wow.
And then, but I
Okay
mean, of course,
then.
a lot of it's commentary. So he didn't have to write everything. So yeah.
Right. That makes sense. Cool. Well, that
Yeah.
sounds like some scary stuff.
Yeah. So
That's
check it
there.
out. It's on Shudder.
And we've got scary stuff this week, even though it's a science fiction week. It's still kind of a creepy week for us. Yeah. For those of you who don't know what we're covering, why are you listening to us? How did you find us? We would love to know that if you haven't, if how you found us if you don't know what we're talking about. But we're talking about a film that came out way long ago, almost 2 decades, well, over 2 decades now. It came out in 2000.
Yeah.
It was
22 years.
called The Cell. It's director Tarsem Singh. It's his directorial debut, his feature debut. He had directed music videos and commercials and things like that, but this is amazingly enough, in my opinion, his directorial debut. It's written by a guy named Mark Protosevich, who also did, unfortunately, I Am Legend, one that we don't
I've
like.
got some words about this dude.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I don't think he's responsible for this movie. I really don't.
well, and I think in notes, let me check my notes real quick, but I'm pretty sure in my notes I found out that he has disowned this movie. He said the final movie is nothing like my screenplay.
And I think that's probably a good thing.
So yeah, hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
So it is. It stars Jennifer Lopez, Vaughn, Vincent D'Onofrio. It also has cast-wise, and I didn't look up his name. I'm sure you may have when you get to casting, but the guy from Devil's Candy,
yeah,
is in it. So when we just covered that movie. Yeah,
we always talk about common threads with our seasons and things.
It's
this
weird.
Season, we have a lot of overlap with casting, and there are not only there's not only Pruitt Taylor Vince who was in this and was in the Devil's Candy, but Dylan Baker is in this, and he was in Trick or Treat, which we covered as well. So,
and the costumes are Aiki Ishioko, who did Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, which we did last year. Last season.
So there's tie-ins all over the place in this one. For those of you unfamiliar with it, please go watch it now before we spoil the bejesus out of it, because we will. But it's a unique style telling of a simple kind of story. It's basically a Criminal Minds episode done with some really incredible visuals. But basically, we start following a child psychiatrist and a new technology that is being developed by a billionaire whose son has gone into a coma. And so he has put all this funding together to try to reach his son. And Jennifer Lopez's character plays a child psychiatrist who is able to, through this technology, to go into his comatose mind and hopefully communicate with him and somehow bring him out of his coma. They've been doing it for 18 months or so, and it's not been as successful as they want, but it's been pseudo-successful enough so that people in the scientific community are talking about the technology and its possibilities, which brings up a parallel story which is going on, which is some FBI agents led by Vince Vaughn who are searching for a killer who does this very unique thing of snatching his victims, torturing them in a cell, and then eventually drowning them, cleaning their body with bleach and dumping their bodies. And his crimes are accelerating. He's at his.
You left out one important element.
Yes.
They're like his toy for a while, and he masturbates with them.
Well, yes. That's an important element, you think? Or
Well,
that's
I
just
mean, you said he just bleaches them and then throws them out. Well, he actually suspends his body above them while he jerks off on
watches
them, which is kind of
videotapes
disgusting.
videotapes of their deaths while
Yeah,
he is
that
jerking off with
too.
them. Yes,
That too.
that
Yes.
that is true. So they're trying to find this heinous monster man,
He's pretty
and
creepy.
they eventually get a hit. They find him, but at the exact same time the FBI is raiding his home, he goes into a coma. He has this very rare disease and he is in a coma. Naturally, they have no way now because he's just abducted another girl and they know that she is in prison somewhere, but they don't know where. So
Yeah,
they're
it's
on a
some-
race
it's-
to find her.
I can't remember what that disease is called, but he has like a cardiac infarction that's like triggered by water or something.
Well, it's a totally fake disease, by the way.
Well, I
that
assume
is,
that,
yes.
but it put
But
him in a
yes,
coma at the exact time that they had were getting ready to arrest him.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And his obsession is water, which makes him kind of a doomed character to begin with.
Mhm.
Sort of thing, because one of his obsessions is water. And so a neurologist that they are talking to about this Carl Stargher, who is the D'Onofrio killer character, while they're talking about Carl, he has an idea. So he tells them about Jennifer Lopez, Dr. Deane, and her team. And so they rush Carl over there, and so she can jump into his mind and find out where he hid this girl who will die within 24 hours.
Right.
And that's the basic core of the story. It keeps going from there, of course, and there's a lot of imagery that goes with it. Had you seen this movie before?
No, never.
Really?
I have actually actively avoided this movie because I didn't know what it was about, but
Yep.
I saw Jennifer Lopez, I saw those weird costumes, and I saw desert, and I just equated it with Dune. I was like, I'm not watching this. I thought this is some sci-fi psychedelic bullshit, and I don't want to see it.
I don't want to see it. Well, so after seeing it, what is your opinion?
I thought it was great.
Perfect.
I
Yay.
loved it. I thought this movie, it rocks. It's kind of like Silence of the Lambs meets science fiction.
Exactly.
It's exactly.
It's Silence of the Lambs meets The Matrix almost, if you want to think about it that way,
yeah,
or
I can see
Dreamscape, that sort of thing. Yeah, I have a bunch of keys, naturally, of course.
I forgot
this,
about Dreamscape, but that's a good one. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's that type of story. I'm glad you like that. I'm very pleased because doing research on it, man, this did not get good reviews.
Well,
I mean, Roger Ebert was one of the few. Roger Ebert was one of the few that gave it a good review. Everybody else just trashed this movie.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I avoided it, as I heard bad word of mouth.
And I had thoughts about that. I think part of that has to do with it's Jennifer Lopez, who was really known more musically. She had gotten attention with what's it named? When she played the biography of what's her name? Cannot remember.
Frida
Sorry.
Kahlo?
No, before that, the Latin American singer that died, Selena.
Yeah, I didn't know she did that. I guess that makes sense, though. I
and
remember Jennifer Lopez from Out of Sight with George Clooney, and I thought she was great in that.
She was, and that was right before this, and so she was getting a lot of clout and stuff like that. But she was the fly girl, I remember her on Living Color, sort of thing. But basically, she's a musician. Vince Vaughn is a comedian, and now they're both in this really uber serious thriller kind of thing, and I think that backlashed on them a lot.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's got a fantastic cast. I mean, I'm a big fan of both Vinces, Vincent D'Onofrio and Vince.
Oh my gosh, D'Onofrio deserved at least deserved a nomination for this movie,
right? And Vincent.
I mean,
Vaughn.
He is a different person.
Yeah,
he is a different person in this. Totally. Yeah. Did you have? So you liked it. That's great. I liked it as well a lot. This is probably my third time seeing it. I saw it in the theater. I think I remember singing in the theater.
Back to what I was saying about the writer. I mean, I went into in depth just to see what these guys had done. And Tarsem is just a kind of a surprise to me because he's really not done anything else except he did episodes of that show, The Fall, which had Gillian Anderson and Jamie Dornan, and I liked it. But he's more known for doing videos. He did a lot of REM videos, and he's done Lady Gaga videos. So he's very visual.
Yeah.
So I mean, there have been other directors. Julian Temple comes to mind immediately that were of that stock, from the video world. But as far
remember,
as
both the Scotts, both Tony Scott and Ridley Scott came from commercials.
Right.
And they went on. I don't see why Tarsem didn't go on unless he just had a bad experience, making a feature, as opposed to just working on the shorts, like, maybe he's a short story visualizer sort of thing. Or he had a bad experience with all the reviews from this. Because like I said, they were scathing and they sucked. And I thought they were bad.
That has a lot to do with it. And then we talked briefly about the writer, Mark Protasevich. And how he disowned the film and said it looks nothing like his. And then I wrote, the only thing he is known for is remakes. He did I Am Legend remake, the Old Boy remake, and the Poseidon remake. And I'm like,
and all three suck.
Well, I haven't seen all three, but I know that I Am Legend sucks. So I was like, this guy's probably not a great director. I mean, not a great writer. And maybe Tarsem knew that, but he was more concerned with the visuals anyway, and he just made it his own.
Could be. I mean, I do think there was obviously a lot of change with the editing and because in the production of it, since we're in the production world talking about a pre-production, the original story had no closure for the little boy at the beginning at all. It basically ended with that scene where she took care of Carl's dog and she's talking to Vince and he's going to be good. And she drives off into the sunset kind of thing. That was essentially the end of the movie as written. And Tarsem felt like there should be closure to the other story. So he took a scene that was actually from the beginning of the movie, added some CGI falling cherry petals and stuff, and put that in as that last scene where she picks up the boat and the boy actually comes to her and they start talking and has that nice kind of bookend kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
It was great. Yeah. But that's another reason that I read that the writer did not like this film, was the way they ended it instead of the way he'd originally ended it.
Screw him.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think Tarsem Singh kind of took the ideas and then made them his own, definitely.
Right.
And are his homages to about 12.5 other things and movies and everyone else.
Well, I read that this movie, it's a very elaborate, sophisticated, I guess you'd say, concept. And the only way they got it greenlighted was because of movies like Silence of the Lambs and The Sixth Sense. The Sixth Sense had that crazy twist at the end that they didn't know if it would work either, and it did. So that's why this movie got made.
Well, and horror was, the serial killer sort of horror was popular then. We were coming out of slashers and into more psychological fear and terror and all of that. But also it's visceral. It's the beginning 15 minutes of this has some pretty graphic stuff to it. Like you said, a guy is hanging from hooks over the bleached body of a victim and masturbating on her.
Right. It takes James Gumb to a whole new level.
Boy, it does. Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. If you watch that and then watch the scenes with Gumb, you'd be like, man, I feel like I'm in a dark place right now.
Right. And this movie actually was 10 years after Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
So it was down the road a bit.
I thought it was. What about scenes? Are there scenes that impressed you that you liked? Because there's a lot of imagery in this. So to pare it down,
most of the scenes have to do with visuals. For me, the one that immediately comes to mind every time I think about it is that scene where he stands up off that throne and his cape is the curtains in the room.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that whole scene, I don't know. That's the one that comes to mind immediately. That's the
Yeah.
first thing. So
And because as he walks down the staircase, he's dragging that thing on the cloak, almost like wings kind of thing.
And it's as big as the room.
Oh, it's
Because
huge.
it encapsulates the room.
Yeah. That was a great scene. The other one, again, is one of the internals, as I call them, or the mental image scenes, is when Vaughn first goes into his mind to save her. And she's in that really funky kind of weird mask, which is very Hannibal Lecter-y,
Right.
but with an Ike Oshika kind of bent. And that whole sequence there from her, and she's now like sort of his, I guess, his slave girl or something maybe in his mind. And then he sneaks up and he's almost like doing a Gary Oldman kind of Dracula look to him with the makeup, but he ties Vaughn down and then takes his entrails out and does the little I was going, man, this is just so wild.
Well, that's actually a legitimate punishment from olden days.
I read that was, he literally took that from a torture device,
and no one ever survived.
That was used. No, well, of course not. No. Why would they?
As far as other scenes, though, and I will get to some of this in Keys, is a lot of this, I guess, because he's a video and visual director. A lot of these scenes came from paintings.
Yeah, there's a lot of keys,
including that one behind me right now with Vince Vaughn and those women looking up. That's a famous painting
in the cornfield. Yep. Another scene that impressed me was really the only scene where they share dialogue, and that's the scene where she's coming from the really twisted parts of his mind, and she goes into the room and he's got the victim in a tub and he's preparing her or whatever. And that's the longest scene that they have together. That whole sequence where they have the dialogue and he talks about his dad baptizing him and he gives a little bit more of the history and she thinks she's in control. And then suddenly he changes and his hair turns into the great big horns and he kind of jumps on top of her and everything. It's a really cool scene. Not only visually, because there is a big key in there from a visual perspective, but there's also, it's a really great acting piece on both of their parts and a real intimidation scene, I think. That would impress me.
Yeah. Another one that I remember is when she's preparing to go back in. And I think this is it. And they tell her there's been a malfunction that she needs to go change something on the control panel. And you realize this is not real. She's actually in him right now. And then all of a sudden she's like small. She's in the room, but she's like the size of a child, as compared to her regular height. I thought that was really kind of cool too, the way they did that.
And that's kind of, it's not immediate rest because we're not thrown into it, but sort of we are. It's kind of showing that he's figured out how to control her.
Yeah. Like he's
in the dream. Yeah. And that was really cool. I like the fact that they don't say dream in the movie. It literally is going into someone's mind, not going into their dreams. You are going into mostly their subconscious, really, whatever they're repressing, kind of thing. But I liked that. That has some other pluses for this. Definitely the cinematography, the costumes, again, the production design in general, even down to finding that place wherever they were when they were in the, I want to call it, the laboratory, but that university, that building, whatever, that conclave, where just the way it's all that futuristic, everything's concrete and blocky and angular, and the way he shoots not only the scenes at the beginning with her, but also the scenes when they're rushing the body in and all of that. Just, it's a really cool space that they are. And I like that production design. Very minimalistic.
I was thinking about Dylan Baker as like the main doctor or whatever. It's like his
Yeah.
program, but I like the woman that's like his assistant. Her name is Miriam Kent, and she's played by Marianne Jean-Baptiste.
Jean-Baptiste.
But I
Yeah.
don't know her from anything. She's like a television actress, I guess.
Yeah, she's done a bunch of television. What was the big one she did? I didn't take it. I think I took it in my notes, but
It's like
I
a
don't know. Let
CSI
me
or something,
check.
maybe.
It wasn't. I don't think it was CSI, but it was something like
Without a
that.
Trace.
Maybe.
I mean, when I pull her up, those are the things that pop up: Without a Trace, Secrets and Lies, Spy Game, and RoboCop.
Yeah.
The
Without a
remake.
Trace is probably it. Yeah. Because
Yeah, that's
she
it.
was probably, I think she was you know, they always have your detectives or your mains, and then they have the boss above them. She was the boss.
Yeah.
She was like the captain or
She
whatever.
reminds me of that other African American lady that we saw on the X-Files second season. I can't think of her name either. And she's great.
Right.
She's in a lot of television stuff. She was on
She was
ER.
also, that was it. She was also in Blind Spot, which is
Okay.
another good series that was on. And she, again, was a police officer in that. So,
but anyway, I sorry, I didn't mean to distract with casting, but when you were talking about the
no,
facility,
go to casting.
I
It's great because
okay. I immediately thought of Dylan Baker. I was like, wow, we were just talking about him being kind of comedic in Trick or Treat, and he's actually the lead science nerd in this, basically. He's great. He's I call him a Stephen Colbert lookalike, but he's great in this. He's a secondary character, of course. Jennifer Lopez is the lead. She plays Catharine Deane.
Yep.
I don't have a lot as far as casting, but I did have a note on Lopez where she wanted these costumes to be more comfortable. And how do you pronounce her? Ishioka? Is that
Aiki Ishioka?
Ishioka advised Lopez to feel uncomfortable because her character is tortured. So she was like, I'm not going to make these costumes so that they feel great.
Yeah, you don't get that. Sorry.
I thought that was kind of cool. Who else? Well, Vincent D'Onofrio plays Strayer or Star.
Wow.
Star, how you say it?
Stargher.
He's phenomenal. I have liked him ever since Mystic Pizza back in back before even Julia Roberts was popular. He's great. He is, for those of you out there that don't recognize the name, currently he's Kingpin in the Marvel universe. Big bald guy. He is great. There is another Vince in this, Vince Vaughn, who has always been one of my favorites. He never really gets great roles, but I've always liked him.
What I love about him is I think he's one of the most controlled and best improvists or ad-libbers. He reminds me of like old school Saturday Night Live and how good those guys were. And he's all, you know, and like in Wedding Crashers and a couple of his others, even in that Jennifer Aniston one, he's just really good. And you know that line was not written. He actually said that on set and they went, keep it. You can just tell in the inflection and the way he does it. And he's just really good at that without it being Chevy Chase silly almost. You know what I mean? He's just a really strong comedic actor. But I thought he did a great job in this. And this was, you know, a very impassioned, dedicated, conflicted character too.
Right.
So,
this is a little bit of a digression, but what was that theater troupe from Chicago with Gary Sinise and John Malkovich?
Steppenwolf.
Okay. Was Vince part of that? Because he's from Chicago too.
Oh, I don't know. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll look it up real quick.
Anyway, I always relate Vince Vaughn to like Gary Sinise and John Malkovich because I know they're all from that area, and
I could see
even
that.
though Vince Vaughn may be a little bit younger, I don't know. Who else? I've got that he's a comedic actor and accepted the role of Peter in this film at around the same time he agreed to be Norman Bates in the remake of Psycho, because he was trying to play against his comedic background.
That
This
makes sense.
works. Norman Bates, he actually is really, really good as Norman Bates. It's just not a great movie.
Well, that's
Because
because they just did it shot for shot.
yeah,
So
it was basically
there's nothing to it.
Gus Van Sant being a little lazy, or maybe not being lazy, being too meticulous. I don't know really how you would say that with that movie. Anyway, back to this film. Another person that I really, really like that is in this movie is Jake Weber.
Yes.
He plays Gordon Ramsay. He's like the assistant to Vince Vaughn's detective. I always equate him with Tim Roth. I think they look a lot alike.
Yep.
But if you don't know this, and you probably don't, David, Jake Weber is one of the leads in the Dawn of the Dead remake that Zack Snyder did.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't know that. I know him from television. He's done a bunch of television.
Okay. Well, he and Sarah Polley is the lead in that movie, and she's normally a director and not an actor. And Ving Rhames is in it, and I keep going back. Mekhi Phifer's in it. So I'm thinking, we should probably do that next season, because we've talked enough about the remake now that we should probably visit it, even though it is a Zack Snyder property.
Yep, probably.
So elsewhere in this cast, another familiar face is Dean Norris, who plays Cole. He's one of the cops. He's great in Breaking Bad. He plays, I can't think of the lead character's name, but he's the brother-in-law of that lead character from Breaking Bad. I always have liked Dean Norris. He's another one of those that he's just a solid character actor. This woman, I do not know. Her name is Tara Subkoff. She played Julia, the one that is trapped, that they are trying to rescue before the chamber floods. Apparently, Tarsem asked her in an interview if she could swim. And of course, she responded, yes.
Of course, she's an actress.
But it turned out she couldn't go underwater without holding her nose. And apparently, had he known, he would have just switched the roles, and she would have been cast as the victim earlier on in the movie that's already pretty much dead when they find her.
Right.
But they couldn't do that, so they didn't have the money or time to reshoot these things, which made it kind of troublesome when they were filming her scenes underwater. So
yeah, I guess
through the tube and stuff. I thought that was kind of funny, but good for her for not back in town.
Well, and doing what actors do, which is, hey, so can you do this? Yeah, sure.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. And then you suddenly start YouTubing how to do that. Yeah. So you're
can you spontaneously hiccup and skip backwards? Yes, I certainly can.
Yeah.
And then let's see who else is in this. The only other one I can mention is the medical guy, and that's Vince Pruitt Taylor Vince, who, as we know, was just in a movie we covered called The Devil's Candy. And I told you he was tired of getting typecast as bad guys. And obviously in this movie, he is not a bad guy. He's just basically telling them the medical data that they need to know.
Well, and the other thing casting wise, I'd like to mention, he's only in one scene, but I like him. And I recognize him as the Patrick, I think his name is Bacall. Is his name? He played the father. He's the billionaire who paid for all of the research and everything. And he's done a gajillion movies. He has a great accent.
His name reminds me of Lucian Baines.
Yeah, the character. And he should, I think, he should be a Skarsgård, like one of their uncles or something, because he reminds me, he's from Belgium. I researched and found out. And he always plays that kind of powerful figure who has a secret or knows more than you do in the room, kind of subtext to him, no matter who he plays. And he's really good, but he's done a ton of stuff.
He has a very long resume. The only thing that jumps out at me is he was in Panic Room with Jodie Foster.
Yep.
And he was in Carnival, that series that was on HBO briefly.
Yeah.
Oh, you know
but
what? He was in
he's
A View to a Kill. I bet you he was the villain in A View to a Kill.
well, and he's also he was in every episode of Kindred, that series that was based on the White Wolf game that I really loved and thought should have been a series, and they just killed it after like 10 episodes. But he's a great character actor, really good.
Right. And
So.
you're right. His name is
It's like Peter Bacall or
Patrick Bacall. He played Lucian Bane.
Yeah. Yep.
And then that's pretty much what I got for cast. However, it did win. Actually, didn't win some awards, but it was nominated. Actually, it did win some awards, but it was also nominated for several. It was nominated for an Academy Award for costumes. No,
makes sense.
Actually, makeup. Excuse me, not costumes.
Makes sense too.
Yep. Yeah, because maybe they didn't give it costumes because some of these were rehashed. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like costumers we go, no, you're just using them Dracula costumes.
Well, they are. I mean, those muscle suits they wear while they're going under are the same kind of armor that Dracula had and they just basically use the same thing. So maybe they didn't do that. I don't know.
Yeah, they are the same armor. It is the same armor.
They just basically reuse them. The Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films nominated it for some Saturn Awards. It was nominated for Best Science Fiction Film, Best Actress, Best Costumes, and Best Makeup. But Bram Stoker Awards, which is a writing award, so Mark was nominated for screenplay, even though he disowns it. Dumbass. Right. He should have just kept his mouth shut. Fangoria Chainsaw Awards gave it 3 wins. So we always talk about the Chainsaw Awards, and here you go. It won Best Supporting Actor for Vincent D'Onofrio because he plays a sick fuck. It won Best Score, which is Howard Shore, and that's another reason why this movie feels like Silence of the Lambs, is because it's the same composer. And then it also won Best Makeup. They also nominated it for Wide Release Film and Best Screenplay, but those did not win. And it is not on the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. So,
but he needs a new edition. It is good. It is, and a ton of keys, because that's a good segue for us into keys, because there's a bunch of that. I would like to say in my watch notes, I said, there's lots of voyeur in his cinematography. And I thought that's from the very beginning. So it's very interesting that he established, all those big panorama shots at the beginning of her walking in the desert. And then the way they show the big panorama shot of the truck pulling up to the silos and everything. Everything is all this, we're looking at something removed, like a voyeur kind of thing, which kind of is interesting that we're going to go so in tight into their minds. Yeah. Kind of thing. I thought that was a really cool choice for him as a director to make. Tons of keys from this. I mentioned Dracula not only for costumes that are repurposed, but also for Vincent's look. A couple of his makeup looks, he looks very similar to me. It's kind of like the Oriental version of Gary Oldman's makeup as old Dracula. I've got Coma, the movie Coma, because remember in that movie, they're all hanging from the funky cables and stuff.
Exactly. And the minute I saw them suspended from those cables, I was like, "Oh, Michael Crichton's in the room."
Yeah.
That's funny.
We had said Silence of the Lambs, just for several reasons, not only for the crazed killer, but the subgenre itself of tracking a psychological killer kind of thing.
Yeah. I have one that I'm assuming Did you ever finish the series Hannibal?
No.
Okay. There's a scene in this that's very striking where she is confronting a young Stargher, and there's a horse in the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then these like glass slides come down and divide that horse into segments and split it apart like microscope slides. And that is right out of Hannibal, the series. Brian Fuller did the exact same thing with the human body in Hannibal. And I don't
Well,
know
and
if you've seen that episode.
the key for that is another artist, which is Damien Hirst. Damien Hirst has an exhibit in London in the museum, and it's not a horse. I think it's a cow or something else, but it's bisected like that.
Okay.
And it's an actual art exhibit. And that's probably where both of them got the idea to do it in the film.
Maybe so. And I may have that. I copied and pasted several keys of artists that I'll have to go through. I don't really have them organized because I'm a bad host, but I may already have that.
Well, we can, we can get to that if it comes.
Sure.
One I know you've got is Ken Russell.
Because I do have Ken.
This is very Ken Russell sort of feel to it. The cinematography, the music, the way when they go into, when especially first when she goes into his mind, it's this really odd sounding, weird instrumentation music, which is very Altered States kind of feel to it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The opening of this movie reminded me of Lawrence of Arabia. I was like, how is she walking on that blade?
The ridge.
Of sand. I was like, wouldn't that like collapse and she'd go running down it like Peter O'Toole?
Well, and I looked it up because I thought, 2000, CGI was coming around, but no, they actually filmed that on location. Yeah. So she literally is walking on a sand dune for that with a helicopter.
Well, I think of CGI as like 92 or whatever, whenever Jurassic Park came out.
Right.
That's what I usually equate modern CGI with. But other things that reminded me of things like there's a scene where that kid says it's the boogeyman. And I was like, wow, that's kind of like Halloween. That's very much like Halloween. Because the little kid is scared of the boogeyman.
Yep. And he's has a right to be.
Yeah. And then I jotted down "Sing a Song of Sixpence" because that's actually the title of one of my first short stories that is still unpublished.
There you
go. Hellraiser. That picture behind me with the hooks in his flesh, lifting him up during a sexual act is straight out of Hellraiser.
That's a good one. I did not have that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, for sure.
I had mentioned Dreamscape because Dreamscape was the movie where, even if you're in close proximity to them, you can go into their dreams and assassinate them or try to kill them or whatever, because what happens in their dreams happens to their body, which is also a Matrix thing. If you believe in the dream, it'll come. If you believe it's real, it'll happen to you, kind of thing. And also Inception. Again, where they're going into someone's dream to manipulate them and change them. I also have a heavy gamer influence like Silent Hill and Resident Evil and all of those survival horror games, because especially when she first goes in and she's in that really weird room where the cells keep opening up and you're seeing these twisted you're seeing probably all of his earlier murders. And what he did to those women, because it seems like he individualized them in some way. But it's really creepy and, dripping walls with rust on them. And so it's a very survival horror game atmosphere.
Do you know who I get the production company for this movie is?
No, I didn't take that note.
It's the house that Freddie built, New Line Cinema.
New Line. Okay, then.
And earlier this season, I mentioned that the movie Alone in the Dark was actually preceded. That was their second film. So that came out in 1982. And then Nightmare came out in 1984. This came out in 2000. So by this time, Robert Shea and the gang at New Line Cinema had a pretty good thing going because of Freddie.
Oh, yeah.
So,
obviously.
So this movie has a lot to owe. It owes a lot to Freddy Krueger.
I agree with that.
You mentioned Dreamscape. I wrote, this movie reminds me of Silence of the Lambs, and even has Howard Shore doing the music. Which is kind of funny. Here's a good one. Did you notice what movie was playing while Catharine Deane falls asleep watching television?
I was saving that to let you do it. It was one of our favorites. It was
Oh my God.
fantastic planet.
I was like, wow, I can't believe I've actually seen that movie in another movie now.
I remember watching it going, and as soon as she's falling asleep and she's watching, I'm going, oh my God, I hope this movie's better than that.
Oh my gosh. That movie was so bad. But
It
anyway,
was. We did not enjoy that one.
no.
No.
No. However, we did cover it for you folks out there that would like to check out that episode. It's a short one.
As a personal note, I have two personal keys that come
Sure.
from this, which are Twin Peaks. One of my favorites, because she's wrapped in plastic and by the water, and that's how we find the body of the first or the his sixth victim, the first and we see in the movie. But also in that scene where he's prepping the body and he's mumbling, and when he's in the water of the bathtub, he says, "Mares eat oats and does eat oats and little lambs eat ivy," which is the same thing that the father killer sings in Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just put David Lynch as a key.
That's a good one too. I could see that. Yep.
I mean, I copied and pasted something from IMDb, and there are lots of David Lynch isms in this movie, not just Twin Peaks. The scene where Catherine gets trapped in a closet and is forced to watch a young Carl is photographed to look almost identical to Blue Velvet.
Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
Yep. I got that one.
Carl's, you mentioned the wrapped in plastic body, which is totally Laura Palmer.
There
are also other references to Twin Peaks. You mentioned the song, and then when Stargher walks backwards and speaks in a warped voice, it's almost like that scene with the short person,
the dancing man
dancing and speaking backwards. Yeah, exactly. So there's
That's
lot
a
of.
good one
I mean,
too.
it's clear that Tarsem was influenced by David, and Lynch is of course a very visual director, so it makes perfect sense that Tarsem would admire him, I think.
Yeah, I've got, speaking of Tarsem, I've got in my notes, Tarsem was influenced by Mark Romanek, who did Perfect Drug and Closer for 9 Inch Nails, those two videos. And they've got that kind of shutter cuts where frames are missing and it disorients you because it's suddenly like you go, and that became a big trope later on in horror movies, especially with all the Ringu and Ring kind of horror where the ghost is down the hallway and then suddenly they go, and they're right in your face.
Right.
Kind of thing.
It's also, I mean, the staccatic is a little bit similar to 28 Days Later as well.
Yep. Same thing.
It's more rapid.
Yes.
Yeah.
He also said he was influenced by videos of Floria Sigismondi, who does a lot of Marilyn Manson's videos.
Right.
So yeah,
which, I mean, again, Marilyn Manson and 9 Inch Nails are hand in hand as far as
of course
goes. Yeah.
Yeah, they like that pseudo depravity, darkness sort of feel to their videos, which is definitely an influence on this movie.
Well, there was one scene where Carl is cleaning his victim, and I was like, this looks really familiar to me. What is this? And I found out it's the set from the Losing My Religion video, because he directed the REM video, Losing My Religion, the one where Michael's kind of bouncing his head up and spinning around like David Byrne.
Well, yeah. And the bathtub's on the left and the window's in the center.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was it's very, very familiar. And then the only other thing I have, I guess, are some of these paintings. And there's Damien Hirst. I knew I'd come up on it because I figured I had cut and pasted it. And that you're right. It's the thing with the microscope slides and the animal. What else? Oh, the painting here behind Vince Vaughn. I mean, that scene right there is inspired by a painting called Dawn by a Norwegian painter named Odd Nerdrum.
Yep.
That's a strange name. then we mentioned Damien Hirst. Oh, okay. At around 42 minutes, the scene where Catherine is chasing Carl through a stone hallway before she enters the room with the horse is based on a Swiss painting from H.R. Geiger called Shot. Schacht. And maybe that's all I had. I thought I had. Oh no, the only other thing I had was that the cloth Catherine removes from her face bears an image that's very reminiscent of the Shroud of Turin.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I just put Shroud of Turin. I mean, that's kind of like a key.
I have two last ones. I have this movie kind of reminded me of What Dreams May Come. And I looked it up. What Dreams May Come actually came out earlier, I think in like 98. But that was the Robin Williams one where they go into the paintings.
It's Richard
and
Madison.
The whole world is very, impressionistic kind of thing. And it just reminded me of that in a way, although much more dark.
Have you ever read
that movie? I have not.
It's a Matheson book where he speculates on the afterlife. And
wow.
I have a hardback novel that has What Dreams May Come and Somewhere in Time together, and I have it autographed by him.
Wow. And my last one is definitely a huge key reference.
Okay.
So this maybe even Mark came up with the idea because there was a short story written decades ago where a psychiatrist enters a patient's mind in order to control their dreams. It was called He Who Shapes, and it was written by Roger Zelazny, the science fiction author. And there was a couple of things when I was doing research on it that said that was probably the inspiration for this story. So huge key shout out there.
Zelazny,
Zelazny, Zelazny. Roger Zelazny. He was a 60s, early 70s sci-fi writer.
Okay, that makes sense. I'll
and that's it.
Throw that in the notes as well. Yeah, I think I'm out of keys. I thought I had more artists, but I think I must be confusing Damien Hirst because we talked about him earlier. I did have one other little bit of trivia though that I found kind of funny, and that is that Vincent D'Onofrio later admitted that his wife refused to sleep in the same bed with him for 2 weeks after seeing this movie.
Wow. Makes sense. You went to a dark place, Vince. I don't want to talk to you anymore.
It's because he is a creepy fuck in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, all incarnations of him,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's creepy. It's really good. I enjoyed it. And I'm glad you liked it. That was good. Every now and then we'll get one that we surprise each other with.
Yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was one I hadn't seen. Another common bond we have with this season is we keep showing each other movies that we haven't seen and that we like.
Yeah.
Not always, but in most cases.
In most cases, yes.
Yeah, and we would like to thank all of you folks out there for joining us today on our little trek back to 2000 and this movie called The Cell with Jennifer Lopez, Vince Vaughn, and Vincent D'Onofrio. If you would like to catch other shows of ours, we have several short shows now that are on YouTube only. You can always check those out there, and please subscribe. And for those of you who want to dive a little deeper into some television land, we have shows on Patreon with the original Star Trek is called the Dilithium Chamber, and with the X-Files, and that is called X-Files Declassified. So we'd love to see you over there as well. And until next week, David, I guess I will be seeing you out there in those darkened theaters.
Yes, we'll see you then.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.